Oh, there we go. Good morning. Wednesday, March 26th, 2025 at 9 o'clock. Sorry. Here in House Transportation, we had almost all of the bills that were on our wall presented last week, but with scheduling difficulties, we didn't get to one of them. And this morning, I really am glad to welcome in Representative Nugent, and we are here she gets her chance to tell us about the bill, why she put it in, what problem she's trying to solve. And then we as a committee will be meeting and talking about which ones we may or may not want to work into the DMV or potentially working separately in the second half. So good morning and thank you for joining us and thank you for working through the scheduling, and it is all yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. So this bill was a result of a constituent that emailed me and our senators and some other reps. Oh, sorry, Kate Nugent, representative from South Burlington. So we had a constituent contact us whose husband has some severe mental health issues, like manic depressive, I think, and had in one of the manic episodes gone to a car dealership and purchased a $60,000 car. And they did not really have the money to pay for that. So when he got home, it caused some challenges for their financial situation. And they just realized, there's no way you can even talk about returning. There's nothing really you can do once you've purchased the car. So I talked with Senator Lyons a little bit about this. And initially we're thinking, what could we do? Could we add like a period that maybe you could void that contract somehow, like a lot of other contracts have like a 3-day kind of thing. And then when we looked into it with legislative counsel, realized that this did not exist, I don't think, anywhere in the country. And, it's a big financial risk for the auto industry, but we still wanted to explore ways to protect the consumer as well in that situation. And so what we kind of settled on was a study committee to look at the situation and see if there's anything we could do for folks, because I'm sure that would not be the only, time that ever happened. So this bill creates a study committee to look at that and see what could possibly be put together to help that situation out.
Okay. Representative Pouch?
Yeah, thanks. Was there any discussion during this of like not being necessarily a motor vehicle, but being like a dollar value of some purchase over, some dollar value? Because, I know I don't know if you sign for a mortgage or you sign for things and they say, hey, you got 3 days to back out. So was there any discussion about, rather than being a motor vehicle, having some kind of dollar value in that?
Not yet, but that seems like something that the study committee could look at, I would imagine. It's a good question.
Representative Wells?
I actually had something similar like that happen to me once. I sold this guy, I'll call him Todd, because that was his name. And I sold him the car. He paid the deposit. He calls me up at midnight and says, my wife will divorce me if I don't get out of this deal. So it was an individual case by case, and Mark Hayes, the owner of Hayes Ford in Newport, let him out of it.
Oh, wow.
But there was no law, as you said, to force us to do that. But we chose to save his marriage.
That's pretty good.
That excuse,
So, Representative Keeter?
Good morning. Thank you for doing this. So there is, Vermont does have a 3-day cancellation rule, but it only has to do with home solicitation, anything to do with your home. So you're having a study committee to see if you can expand this rule into vehicle purchases. That's what we're thinking about.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, it doesn't dictate exactly which that specifically. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Representative Casey?
The problem I see is if somebody signed a contract, what way could it go? Could it go a lot further than just a vehicle? And then I don't think if I was an auto dealership, would be too happy if somebody brought a vehicle back 3 days later after he took it to Florida. And there's French fries and stuff tucked in the seats and stuff. And, that's one of the things I see. That's why I see as a problem there. And something should be done before they get that far,
Mhm.
before that person that has an issue or whatever it was, before the contract is signed, there should be, I don't know what you do there, but I don't think it should be a burden on the dealership. You know, that,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, like
So-
some parameters around, I mean, I imagine that would be something that would need to be figured out as well, like, yeah, you wouldn't want to, I think, the intent anyway is for someone like in this type of situation that gets home and just realizes for whatever reason that this was a mistake and they would return it maybe like as soon as they got it home, but I've, you know, it's sort of like reminds me of what you're saying, like how some outdoor companies used to have no restrictions on return policy, and then people would like wear the equipment for a year and then try to bring it back, where you wouldn't want that situation.
And a car is something like, basically you're kind of wearing it for a few days.
Mm.
I would feel a little funny of, you know, hey, well, it's a new car, but you know, it's got 1,500 miles on it. You know, I want to see less than 20 miles if it's new. So I just, yeah. Anyways, I'm good.
Representative, did you happen to, when you were just starting to put this together, is there, and I thought somewhere on new cars, there might be a current, some number, like a 24-hour or 48-hour. Not that you're aware of, or if you're not sure, you don't have any information on that. I was just curious.
Yeah,
Is
that's,
there anything on new cars, 24 hours, 48 hours on the?
I don't know.
I
I
don't
didn't
know.
come up with legislative counsel, but I can try to find out.
I just was curious. I had thought that there was some level of 24 hours or something, but I don't know. But I appreciate you bringing it to us, Representative.
I think we have a lemon law now, like if there's something wrong with the vehicle, I don't know what the timing is on that, but
That would be a,
that would cover
that's a,
different part of it.
yeah, we have covered lemon law in this committee in the last couple of years and have made some modifications to it. So that does exist for a different purpose than what you're talking about, but you're looking at potentially broader consumer protection. So, okay. Does anybody else have any questions for our presenter? Thank you very much for coming in this morning, and thank you for letting us know and
Thank you.
validating your bill.
Thank you. Thanks for being accommodating to my schedule. Have a great day today. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I did see our next presenter is here. Well, Representative Damien is not here. Representative Donahue, do you feel you need our legislative council here before you start, or you're happy to start? Okay. If Representative Donahue, please come on up and tell us about the amendment that you're proposing for H488, the transportation bill that's to be on the floor later today. Welcome.
Representative Van Donahue, and Berlin is one of the towns I represent. And the only reason it's too bad Damien isn't here yet is because I want to mention, I think he did a great job of taking like a, 2-sentence amendment and really organizing it so that it was clear and made sense. So the background on this, and I'm just going to pass around some pictures of the current bridge that is Route 12 over the Dog River. This is taken one shot from each direction, and you can clearly see in it the sidewalk that has been part of that bridge since whenever the bridge was first built. It's actively used. There's a local guy who gets out the snow blower and clears it every time there's snow. The folks who live on the other side, their mailboxes are across the bridge. There's a little park on one side and so forth. The bridge is being replaced. It's very old. It's going to be a brand new bridge, presumably for, I don't know how long they last. You guys would know better, 100 years. It's a long-term major investment. And we have a state public policy about enhancing pedestrian access. The current plan for the bridge, the design eliminates the sidewalk, which seems like it's like going backwards. The policy is increase the number of sidewalks, and this is removing it. And there is a reason. They actually started out with a design that included a sidewalk. It's been redesigned to only have a bicycle path and with the idea that pedestrians can cross in the bicycle pathway. And the reason is that they require an MOU with the municipality around, maintenance, like the state can't come around hauling a snowblower and clear it. And the town manager said that the MOU they were presented with was just on a lot of levels, just not viable. It wasn't something they felt at all comfortable with signing. And so as a result of not getting the MOU with the municipality, they moved forward on changing and redesigning. I was quite frankly horrified to hear that. And AOT provided the background, the email exchange with the town manager saying, no, I'm not going to do this MOU. And I spoke with the town manager who said it wasn't a reasonable thing for us to sign. And it seemed to me, this is state public policy. The municipality may be uncomfortable with signing it, but if it's state policy, then the state should be really working on maybe revising the MOU to make it something that made better sense for the town. The state should be putting the effort in to not just say, well, they wouldn't agree to what we needed. And so we're going to invest in a 100-year bridge without a sidewalk when it currently has one. So that's the purpose of it, because it also occurred to me that if this is happening one place, if it hasn't already happened, it may repeat itself if we don't clarify the law and say, it being state public policy to do this, we really need to put the effort in to make it work for municipalities. So the bill is in two parts. The first one is really directed to the current situation and any others that may be happening in the state, and saying, go back and look and see if there's a way to work things out with the municipality to make it something viable, so that we meet that priority. And then the second part is really about reporting back and seeing, do we need any changes, whether it's in your protocols or an adjustment in the statute, to really make sure that we can meet this really important state policy. So that's the basics of it. As I say, I think Damien did a really good job of sort of laying out a lot more detail and clarity than what I was suggesting at first. So the copy of the amendment, of course, is in today's calendar. And I also have on hand, if anyone wants to look at it, refer back to the current state policy on complete streets.
Representative Ford?
So when is construction set to begin on this bridge? Do you know?
They are in, I know I sent an email saying, is it too late to change? And they basically said, well, it's pretty far along in terms of design. It's not in construction phase yet. So, and that's why some of this is worded, to the extent possible, to the extent feasible. If it's too late, it's too late. It would be really regrettable, but it's not being built yet. There had been a design with sidewalks. It's getting close to the point of no return, but not quite there.
Representative Wells, and then
Is that new bike path proposed the same size as the one that we see in the photos?
I'm not sure AOT would know that. I think they are widening the bridge and it's going to be a wide bike path, which is why they felt, well, it can accommodate pedestrians. I know I've talked to some residents who feel like we wouldn't feel safe, with that kind of a setup,
Representative Pouch.
Yeah, but just to clarify, it's just a wider shoulder, not a bike path, a separate bike path.
It's not separate the way the current bicycle, right?
So,
Right. I think they may have, whether it's lines or even, a curb piece or something like that, but it's not an independent bike path.
so my question is, what else is in the MOU besides you've got to keep it shoveled, keep it, what other requirements are there for the town to take on it besides, just shoveling, I guess?
I didn't look at the MOU. What the town manager said was, the shoveling was a key part, but it was also felt just some of the language, the obligatory language and the way it was framed was just something they were not at all comfortable with signing. And it wasn't as if there were there was like negotiation over wording or anything like that. It was sort of, this is what we need from you. No, we can't commit to that.
Thank you.
Representative Valerie?
Yeah, I think this is a really important kind of example of a situation that, as you say, is likely replicated across rural Vermont. And I think, it could create have versus have not communities in terms of walking and biking infrastructure where, smaller places that lack some of the capacity that is envisioned, in this, this MOU, let's say, are going to be missing out. They're going to get sort of something that is much more car oriented. And it sounds, in this case, this is quite dramatically going backwards. I would agree with you 100% on that. You wonder why, if somebody is now snowblowing this, and apparently this has been the case for decades, presumably, and it connects to a public park and mailboxes, daily destinations, right? Why purely for the convenience of snow plowing, we would be taking this huge step backwards when so much policy, prioritizes walkable communities, but also communities that are safe, comfortable for walking and for all ages and abilities, which is, another part of this. So it does seem like a major step backwards.
I should add that this is an area, it is a little, it's the Riverton to the extent they have a center. There's a fire station there. There's the little park. There's a pizza place across on the other side of the bridge. It's also an area that's been identified for potential development. They've just connected with, I forget the rural development folks who come into a town to talk about future, and that's specific to this Riverton area. Riverton's not it's just a neighbor, it's a designation, it's part of Berlin, it's not its own municipality. But so it is right now, there's like massive amounts of foot traffic, but it's, again, looking at 100 years, this is an area that will grow further.
Representative Burke and then Representative.
I just agree with everything Representative Lawrence said, and I don't understand how much time or effort would it be to snow blow during a bad snowstorm, just one swath across the dredge with a snowblower. I mean,
well, part of the piece to me is, if we have a big snowstorm and they don't have the capacity, you could just put a little red tape across it for that time and briefly not be able to use it, as opposed to just
for the whole
not having it at all.
season.
Right.
The other thing I was wondering is but I guess it wouldn't work because of the plowing, if you had a designated, separated bike lane. It would be safe, and people would feel safe, but that would mean putting a curb there. Basically having a bike lane sidewalk sort of thing.
Right, and that is, their redesign does involve, I don't know the exact structure, but they're seeing it as a designated but of course you're sharing it with bicycles.
Yeah.
And it's not a raised sidewalk or something like that. Folks I've talked to have said, they don't feel it would make them comfortable or feel safe for the kids to walk over to the pizza place, so forth.
We had another hand, I think that hadn't gone yet. Representative White and then Representative McCoy again.
Thank you, Representative Donahue. I'm in full agreement with Representative Lally and Burke that it feels like a step back, and it's really, we want to be seeing more pedestrians, walking areas. So I'm glad you brought this to our attention, and I'd love to see how we can look at this project and see what we can do to change it, and also, look at what other projects might be impacted like this. I mean, in our town, we had a pretty nice sidewalk program put into place maybe 5 years ago. And part of that, at one point, a snow blower that the town runs was purchased, and that's used to plow these really nice sidewalks or blow them. But anyway, so maybe it necessitates the town having something like that, but I'd love to see how we can stop this and change it to get back to some of the priorities for pedestrians and bicyclists. I'm not sure whether in terms of, is an amendment to the T-bill the right way to do it, or the separate bill? We kind of leave that to others with more experience, but thank you.
Representative McCoy, I think you were next.
Thank you. So, I guess my understanding and listening to what saying, Representative Donahue, is that the state was willing to build the sidewalk, but the town is not willing to maintain it through the memorandum of understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, at a high level, yes.
Okay, so, I understand where the state's coming from because they're coming through with those big plows.
Right, they can't plow it.
So how are they gonna, well, let's stop, let me unhook, let me get the snow plower out so I can do the sidewalk. It's just not gonna happen. So I don't know if this is something that has to be worked out, like, once again, maybe the state says, we're giving you one more shot to try to figure out how you're gonna, we designed it with the sidewalk in mind, but we need the memorandum of understanding signed. So the liability of plowing that and maintaining that sidewalk does not fall on the state. It falls on the town. So I don't know if that's feasible to happen or.
Yeah, I don't get the sense there was ever a sit down and let's go back and forth and see what language we might be able to adjust. Is there an option of saying, at times, if the local guy who can't plow it is sick, it won't be accessible. Or if, the degree of the town committing, we assume the liability for anything bad that happens versus, we'll do our best and it,
Closed during inclement weather.
Right. And that was part of the point of the future work as well. How can we, create MOUs for what the town needs to do without making it something that's that the town doesn't feel it's able to take on in terms of whether it's a liability or the kind of language
Right, yeah.
that's used is that we shouldn't have, whether it's kind of boilerplate MOUs that make it that towns are really uncomfortable with the degree of commitment they're having to sign, that there needs to be more give and take and let's try to resolve things so that we, the state can meet the state policy priority.
Right. So I mean, similarly in the town, which we're having a bridge rebuilt as well. Currently, there is a sidewalk on one side across the river, the Bowling River, but that is not maintained by the state. The
Right.
town takes on the liability of maintaining that sidewalk to get pedestrians back and forth over the bridge.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's suggesting that the state should be
Yeah,
coming in
so
with a snow blower.
Yeah, so I don't.
But there, see, it's not connected to other sidewalks. That may be in the future.
Okay, right.
There's no sidewalk, as you saw from the picture, on either side. The sidewalk doesn't continue. It's just, so once you're off the bridge, you'd be in an area that's just the side of the road. But it's about, one is being locked in. One, you can add a sidewalk later. The other, you're locking it in for 100 years. And that was,
I think Representative Lally and then Representative Keiser.
Yes, I think one of the very provocative things that you said to my ears was that this is an area that is being considered with potential for future, development, which would mean housing, mixes of uses, things like that, right? And that is absolutely the focus of all of the land use reform, which I believe there is tripartisan interest in trying to do, right? So this just seems an essential piece of this to get this right so that we're not replicating car centricity conditions that will be in place for the next century across Vermont, precisely at a time when, we are trying to We have, seniors who are disproportionately live in rural Vermont are very transportation burdened to get around in their own communities, right? So, we're hoping to have school reform that, create some kind of legible framework for where we have schools and hopefully in places where there would be opportunities for kids to actually walk to school, at least that's where I'm hoping we may go with this. So yeah, this just seems like a real fly in the ointment.
And I want to point out, this does not say thou shalt put the sidewalk in. It says thou shalt go back and see what you can do, maximize efforts to work things out so that it's viable, so that we can support state policy.
Who takes care of the existing sidewalk?
A neighbor in that neighborhood, goes out with the snow blower and clears it off. After the big, I went to look to check, because I go over that bridge every day coming back and forth to Montpelier. And after the big snowstorm, the biggest of this year anyway, I kind of took a peek up there. It was all straight through, all snowplow.
Representative Tomlinson?
Yeah, thank you, Rep. Donahue. Could you just explain again, like specifically what the amendment does? And it just requires the agency to review the plan or to reconsider the MOU? What's required there?
So it says that in this coming fiscal year, if construction hasn't been commenced, the Agency of Transportation shall, to the extent practicable, review any applicable agreements with and requirements for the municipality to determine if modifications to the agreements can be made to support the construction of sidewalks. And then if it can be done, to the extent feasible, shall seek to modify those in order to have it work. And then the second part is, and report back to whether we need changes more systemically to address the problem in the future.
Anybody else have any other questions? Representative Bell?
And maybe it's for Damien. So in statute, there's something that says there is an MOU that must be signed and, or is this just sort of part of the process of the bridge design and review with the towns? I know they have a full process where they have public, opportunities for the public to weigh in.
Yes.
So,
and I know the public was supportive of wanting to do it. And Damon might know better. My understanding is that I didn't find anything in statute. It's part of the protocol, which is why this is about relook, come back to us and say, we need to change that. Or maybe it can't be.
Representative Wiley?
Yeah, just one last question. So I take it what you're maybe saying is there's not a way for the town to appeal and say, we're interested in this, this way that you want to do it is not working for us. We would like to have, try things a little bit differently. There's not that opportunity at this point.
Not that I know of, but again, I think the burden should be on the state to say, okay, what can we do to make it viable rather than, even if a town's reluctant or doesn't want to do it, it's state public policy that we need to do this. And we can't force it on municipalities, but.
Okay. Representative Casey?
is it a town road, a state road?
It's a state road,
Okay.
state highway.
Is it
It's the
busy
main-
area?
It's fairly busy. Yes, it's the main travel route from Northfield to Montpelier. Crosses the Dog River. But it's a busy, the traffic slows down to 35 for that bend and bridge, but it's a 50-mile-an-hour road.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your 100-year thinking. Right now, I guess, I'm assuming it sounds like if you're walking down the road, certain width, and they're gonna make it a little wider when the bridge is there, and maybe the town's sitting there thinking, now we gotta sit there and put these sidewalks in. Maybe I don't know what
Yeah.
their thinking is. I mean, I don't understand. I'm just trying to understand what they're thinking, why they wouldn't want it.
Yeah,
I
I
don't have an
mean,
opinion on it one way or another. I just kind of, so why wouldn't you, if they're just gonna do it? I don't understand. I mean, I can see in my
Yeah.
town of Hubbardton,
right.
I mean, we got little bridges. I mean, people walk through them. I mean, it's no different. If you're walking down the side of the road, it's about the same width. You know, cars, if they're friendly, they move over. But there's not like tons of traffic. But if you're in a busier area, I can see where maybe it'll only get busier in the future. It makes sense.
And where you come on and off the bridge, you have the ability to go much further. You know, it's dirt, but you go
Yeah.
further on the dirt side. And so in the future, who knows how long there may be sidewalks. I don't think Berlin has any intention and, you know, to do sidewalks at this point.
Right. I still understand why.
Representative
Hold on.
Miller? Thank you. Representative McCoy?
So my understanding is the state is willing to engineer the bridge with a sidewalk as long as the town enters into a memorandum of understanding, which we don't know what it says, but probably one of the key points in the memorandum of understanding is the town has to maintain the sidewalk. Is that?
I think that's correct.
Okay.
I think, just understand, they did design it with a sidewalk.
Oh.
Or at least the initial design. I don't know how far, but they did design it and then pulled back and redesigned it with this bike lane instead, because there wasn't an MOU. So they had at least a preliminary design stage.
Okay, we have another minute left here. Representative
Yeah,
Lyon?
this is a little bit mirrored with a condition that happened in my town, which was a sidewalk. Right in our village was built without any pedestrian infrastructure, and it also widened. The bridge was made wider, the new bridge, which actually has created a problem with traffic going into the village even faster, right? So this is kind of a nice narrow condition that you have now, so that it's a pinch point probably, from what I can glean from looking at it on Google Earth and the photographs. But, we were fortunate enough to get a grant from the state to put a pedestrian bridge in. But, the cost of this was incredible. I invite my colleagues to look in the white book to see, what was expended. So my point is coming in after the fact at a point when, we do have housing and so on in the future, which we're hoping to have, it sounds like in this location, it's just not a good use of state resources to not build for, sort of future-proof the infrastructure, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. A 100-year piece of infrastructure.
That's what staggered me. If it was being a road and you're not going to do them now, you can add them later. Not a problem, even if we'd like, it was an area you'd like to have a sidewalk, but to build a bridge, just seems like.
Okay, so if it's quick, otherwise we're up against.
I'm gonna make it quick. I'm just gonna make a note, that in my town, the Waitsfield Great Eddy Bridge from 1833 is a covered bridge with a separate area for bikes and pedestrians, and it's covered so that nobody has to do any maintenance on it. So just noting, we did it in 1833. I mean, maybe that was revised in 1975, but let's not go back and lose some of the great developments that we made years ago.
Okay. Everybody's gathered, but we're gonna cut it off very shortly.
No, I think what Representative Wally says, that there's a realization as you improve roads and widen them, even if it's like, the road will be wider shoulder to accommodate bikes and stuff. That also encourages higher speeds. I think the data shows that as you do all that, cars then travel faster. So it may not be the best answer for bad biking.
Okay.
Thank you.
I do have a couple comments, if you don't, real quickly. I know we're definitely took the time on it. I do want to say that I was a proud resident of Northfield for 2 years, just an awfully long time ago. And I am familiar with where this spot is, and there is a very dangerous big S curve right after the bridge. And so it's helpful that the traffic is slowed down by the pinch point of that bridge. I also want to say, so I appreciate you bringing the amendment. I also appreciate your understanding that it's not, this amendment has nothing to do with this specific bridge, other than it would be part of all bridges that would be asked to be reviewed. Because we as a committee, and as a policy, prioritization and the idea that this committee can influence any one particular project is not an area that we can go down or have precedence to go down. The state spent an awful lot of time getting into prioritization of projects so that the individual members can't lobby the transportation department for action on a particular one project. So the points and the various bridges that everybody brought up does perhaps point to an issue, but we would not take up a bill or any amendment that was geared towards any one project at any point, because prioritization is a system that we use, and we are not in a spot to override that, nor would we move in that direction. So I appreciate your understanding of that, and I want to make it clear to the members that that's a direction. I'd also want to make it clear that our complete streets and designing and the engineering highlighted the need and agreed with the need of where it was at. So the system works to perhaps a point, but the planning, the engineering, the interaction highlighted and did work to a level. Now, whether I hear some things about whether we should perhaps at some point dig into the memorandum of understanding and hear some testimony about that. Perhaps we need to look at the appeals process and how that works. Perhaps we need to dig into the next level of what happens when we get to a situation like this. But I do want to be clear, the public policy in the state to think bike ped first was clearly evident by the agency and clearly involved. So as much as the amendment, and we do have the agency scheduled to testify, and I want to hear more details, and they might be able to speak to some of those things, but we're not going to be able to speak to all of that today. But the complete streets, the planning definitely went in the bike ped direction. It sounds like we may have something to dig into for a future piece. But the agency was at the right spot that we wanted them. Sounds like we could use some more work potentially on some of that. So individual projects are a definite no in anything that we do. I want to make sure for newer members that we really understand that we can't get involved at that level, and that the bike pedestrian planning and mindset of the agency was where we want it to at least start. So that is there. I also will mention this is an awfully long ways from the town garage of Northfield, and it is an awfully long ways from the district garage of the state. And maybe we'll hear more about that or not, but that would be, in my mind, a pretty significant contributing factor to who wants to take care of a bridge a long ways from their facility. And if I were to go back to a town manager that would have to drive their vehicles to no other sidewalk to be maintained, that's very difficult. I also have a state situation. We have a state situation that would have to go an awfully long ways to maintain a sidewalk. So the 100-year view is critical. The actual practicality of handling it is an issue, and may not be for this committee or this amendment, but how do we appeal this? How do we handle it? What's in the memorandum? Why does there have to be one? How does that impact from the money flow and the requirements that come with it? I think is things that everybody I could hear from this committee would like to know a lot more about. And we really appreciate you highlighting that. And I suspect if people agree with that, we're in a position to take a lot more testimony on that. But as far as the individual project or the idea that it didn't get us at least somewhere to where we wanted, that part all worked.
Yep.
So I
Thank
very
you.
much appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank
And,
you. I wanted, yeah, just in terms of your comments about the difficulty and all that. There's been a sidewalk there. It's somehow they've survived, 100 years with a sidewalk, and, new standards may differ. And again, I
love the Vermont ingenuity of them taking care of it themselves. And
Yep.
I hate the idea that we would be discouraging that from happening. It's neighbors that help neighbors that make these things work. And I don't know how to make that happen when we have a huge process and a huge one. And I appreciate you highlighting that, because I couldn't agree more with you than that. We don't want to lose that. That's what connects the
Yeah.
community in the first place.
Yeah.
Probably not, the sidewalk helps, but it's the neighbors that makes the difference.
And the other piece in terms of that first part of the amendment is, and I agree, you can't do bridge specific things. But in terms of anywhere in the state that this is imminent, that we're going to make something irreversible for 100 years, I think that's what we really want to say. Whoa, let's just check back and see if there's a way to work with this.
And without even hearing the agency's portion, which I probably will wait. Let's hear what they have to say. But I think I already indicated that I think there's some areas that we will want to dig into deeper, even if the languages may or may not be part of our bill in this perspective. But there's certainly pointed some areas that we can dig into a lot more.
Appreciate that very much.
Sounds like a number of your colleagues have been in a similar position. Thank you very much, Representative Donahue.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
I would ask, does anybody in the committee feel that we need to review the exact language? Otherwise, I'd like to hear from the agency before side. And then we can always cut into Damien's time in the next section, or do you think there are
Yeah.
questions about this? I also want to be sensitive to, our agency guest was scheduled for 9:30, so 9:35, I'm sorry, and we ran over on a question.
It may be for Damien, for me, it doesn't appear, if I give this a quick look, that this amendment says anything about this specific bridge.
It does not.
It was intentionally drafted that way, just to avoid singling out a specific bridge because of all the reasons the chair mentioned, that we don't single out specific projects. So, otherwise we have every rep in the chamber asking about a specific project in their district.
Only if they were from Franklin County, Damien. They would only be sitting there if that were the case, then it would only be Franklin County reps that would be asking for.
But it does make sense.
Taunton.
It does make sense that when something happens somewhere, that's specific, that says, hey, wait a minute, let's take a look at the system that allowed this or required this or whatever it might be. So thank you.
I think we're saying the same. No, we'll get to that part, right?
So, Mr. Chair, there's an amendment downstairs that I'm gonna go testify on, and I'll hopefully time my return with the finish.
And when we do finish here, we'll be taking a break before we start your next piece here, so feel comfortable to be available as whatever works for you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, and welcome to the chair. I asked the agency to come in prepared to speak to the Donahue amendment, and Jeremy Reed is the chief engineer of the agency with us. I welcome you to the chair, and you have a small presentation piece first, or open for questions thereafter. The floor is yours, or will be shortly.
Kim, can you allow me to share?
Yeah, it shouldn't work either.
I see that, Jeremy Reed is co-host. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair Walker and committee. So Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer for the Agency of Transportation. I did want to just sort of illustrate this specific site a little bit to provide a little bit more context, just because I think it is important to understand. So this is Route 12 between Northfield and Montpelier, and just for everyone's benefit, I grew up in Northfield as well, born and raised, so very familiar with the site. The bridge in question is where my cursor is right now, just to the left of the 12. And essentially, the sort of principal housing area within Riverton is here, sort of centered around this Fieldstone Pizza, which is a very new business to the area. This is Riverton Memorial, about 12 to 15 employees there. Fire station, it's a satellite fire station for the town of Berlin. this is the park as presented. But, you know, and I'll use that word a little bit loosely. Curly Fuels is right here. And again, no retail, that's just sort of a truck depot for them. Chandler Road is here with a dirt road, cemetery, and one trailer right there. And then there is some housing up around the corner. So that's the project site. I do want to share some other pictures about the site. So this is Route 12 looking north. So this is the Fieldstone Pizzas off to the right. Here is the general typical of the roadway. And the aforementioned sidewalk is behind the guardrail here on the right. And you access that by kind of going through this intersection right there. You can see the road, I think, has maybe a 6-inch shoulder on the left and, you know, maybe a foot on the right currently. Looking south, again, sidewalk is in this grassy area here. Again, this is the park such that it is, and similarly, very few shoulder space for pedestrians or anybody for that matter. You know, honestly, I've probably biked over this bridge a dozen times, and only probably a dozen times because it isn't great in either direction. So I want to say it's maybe 12 miles between Northfield and Montpelier, and there's no sidewalks in that entire stretch. And it's basically 50 miles an hour, except for this tiny little stretch here that is 35 miles an hour. So that's kind of the project context that we're dealing with. And I just think that's important to understand the full breadth of it. I will say, as Representative Donahue said, the town is currently not maintaining that sidewalk in any way, shape, or form. It is a local resident who's taken it upon himself to snow blow it in the winter occasionally. And that's a relatively new exercise and clearly not sustainable long term. Any questions on that?
Know how old the resident is, does.
Yeah,
that I don't know. But I think it is sort of a bit of a problem in that the town has no interest in maintaining a sidewalk. Again, for the 30 years I've driven over the road, it hasn't been maintained in any way, shape, or form, and it's certainly not accessible to all users now because you have to sort of traverse a side bank and the tall grass to get to it. And so I just want to be totally upfront as far as what that does look like.
Yep, Representative Casey.
Have you ever had like a counter, like one of those rubber hoses that went across? I don't know if they do that anymore.
We
As a
have
kid, I used to stomp
Yeah.
them down on them.
We have traffic counts, but we don't necessarily have pedestrian counts. Generally, to do a pedestrian count, we would send somebody out there for a period of time, and they just sort of watch how many pedestrians are there and count it, and then you do some extrapolation on that.
When you pedaled back and forth across there, did you have, I mean, the traffic wasn't so jammed up that you
Well-
couldn't navigate through there, or?
It's not comfortable, but it's not comfortable the entire stretch, right? So just north of here, there was a project maybe 30 years ago. It did add some shoulder width, but certainly south of here is very much narrow. It's a foot shoulder at best until you get to Northfield Falls. So that's probably 4 to 5 miles. So to the south, there's not a sidewalk within literally probably 4 to 5 miles. And to the north, it's probably 7 or 8 miles.
Representative Casey, when you go home to Hubbardton, you can take down Route 12 and then jump over the Roxbury Gap. And you can get a feel for how rough how narrow and old Vermont road style Route 12 is between Montpelier and Northfield. But that doesn't, I'm sorry, go ahead, Representative.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering how the travel ways, how are they striped to 11 feet, 10 feet, 12?
So we just did a paving project there last year between Northfield and Montpelier. It was a simple mill and fill. So I think we did make a little bit of an improvement, but my guess is roughly, and it's probably not typical the whole way, That's probably like an 11.2 typical at best, maybe 11.1.
11 foot, 1 inch.
11-foot lane with a 1-foot shoulder.
Oh, okay.
So what we are proposing today, because of the sort of failure to reach an agreement on the MOU, is a 11-foot lane with a 5-foot shoulder on both sides. So that's the accommodation to bike and ped that is being made with this project as proposed.
There's no break between it. It's just that wide, you know.
Correct. There's no physical barrier.
Side, and probably some striping or something.
Exactly right. There's no physical barrier. It is strictly delineated by pavement markings.
So now, currently, how wide is that bridge?
I would say at best, probably, I'll just say 22 feet rail to rail.
So now it will be,
So it'll be 11.5, so it'll be 60, yeah, plus a 2-foot shoulder, curb on either side, so.
so 34 feet. I don't know and it's speed zone 35.
Correct.
Do you think that will increase the speed of traffic? It's like,
Potentially, I mean, so the bridge is definitely a pinch point, but as Representative Walker said, it's in the middle of an S corner as well. And it's just advanced of the railroad tracks, which aren't, you know, pool table smooth either. So there are some other, limiting factors there to the sort of comfortable nature of it.
I would certainly say that in both directions, it is a horrible, unsafe section of road, and it's a wicked S curve on both sides, and coming from both directions, it is. But the overall bigger picture issue of bridges that are that far out and where they're at, that's where, this is a great example of something we can talk about, is an example of bigger picture.
Correct. And I think, it is a small little hamlet community sort of plunked in the middle of a 12-mile, 50-mile-an-hour, really rural stretch. I certainly won't try to predict what 100 years looks like, but this is not going to become, a village center. We see, where the Berlin is putting its emphasis up by the mall, that is a designated village center. I'm not saying they're forgetting this, but, nonetheless. I would also just point out, to the extent that we are constraining ourselves in the future. Realistically speaking, we design our bridges for 100 years, but that's not 100 years without anything. Typically, we do expect a deck replacement to come in somewhere between the 50 to 60 year window, or some sort of preservation treatment. So not that it's a significant factor in this discussion, but I do just want to make that point.
Representative White is next.
I have two questions. Thank you. The first is there, I've seen bridges in other states that have area for cars, bike lane, and they look like bendable barriers between the car and the bike lane. Is that something that allows a plow to go? I mean, do those no?
Yeah.
So is there a solution that would allow plows to just include the bike, or is that?
I'm not aware of a physical demarcation or delineation that you can plow over and have it spring back. I think most of those things have to be somewhat pliable, and at 0 degrees, for instance, they get pretty brittle.
Okay. And my second question is this an opportunity, like, is it the regional planning districts, or could they be called in to help a town or municipality figure out if we can do this nice sidewalk bike lane project? How does the town get the resources to be able to enter into an MOU that they feel comfortable with, whether it's buying a piece of equipment or?
Well, I don't think the answer to that question is very complex, right? You've got to assign resources to plow it, right? And that's the principal sticking point here. And so the sidewalk, for any number of reasons, ADA being one, is 5.5 feet wide as originally proposed. And I'll get into this when I talk about complete streets. We don't want to create 5.5 foot wide snow storage area where it just builds all winter. And then as freeze thaw occurs, it just sort of gradually melts and sort of prohibits maintenance activities. And that really was the sticking point, is snow removal. I'm not aware of any other obligatory language that really was a fatal, insertion.
Representative Tomlinson, I think you, Representative Burke, Coach, then Representative McCoy, Heather, and then over to Representative Couch. I'm sorry. You're up next, Representative.
So that's pretty wide. That's my only concern with slowing down. Right now, it kind of would automatically slow traffic because the bridge is small. Are you putting the 2 5.5 foot? It's 5.5 feet on each side,
It's a 5 foot shoulder on each side.
5 foot shoulder on each side. And currently our law requires 4 foot for bicycle paths.
Probably as a minimum. I guess I won't testify to that, but.
Okay.
But-
So I mean, it's a big bridge now. I mean,
As
it's gonna be-
proposed, correct.
As proposed, it's a big bridge. Have you spoken to the town of Berlin yet?
Yeah, so this sort of discussion goes back years. Largely came to a head in the spring of 2023. We attended multiple select board meetings, showed them example finance and maintenance agreements. Ultimately, the select board in June 19th of 2023 said, okay, pull the sidewalk because we don't want to be obligated to remove snow, basically. And that's kind of where we've moved the
So
project
have
forward.
they seen this latest proposal yet? Oh, and are they in agreement with this latest proposal?
As far as I know, I mean, clearly they're working a back channel, but, they haven't pushed back to the extent of, no, we want a 4 foot shoulder, or they haven't asked us to narrow the road. I think the last formal correspondence that I've seen was in June of 2023, where we attended a select board meeting and they asked us to remove the sidewalk and chose this alternative configuration.
Representative Couch is next.
Yeah, thank you. You may have already answered this, but as far as you know, the only thing, do we have a copy of the MOU?
I don't have it, but I can certainly dig that
It
up.
would be good to just take a look at it.
Yeah.
Representative Keiser and then Representative Lounge.
Oh, excuse me, I guess I got my hand up.
Oh, maybe if you didn't, that's okay.
Like an auction, you gotta
We're gonna run out of time, so.
So I could be very quick, but
Let's make sure everybody's heard.
it's just thank you, Chair. It's just a quick thought, but it seems like the negotiations went fine. The town decided what they wanted, you designed for it, and now, as you say, we got somebody else that's got, and I have no idea who they are, whether they represent a majority of the, and why. And so I think but that we've got a bigger issue about whether or not towns can negotiate or what is the remedy for appeal for such things as this. So there's a larger issue, but the small issue seems self-made.
And if I could just sort of speak to the programmatic issues, because really to Representative Walker's point, that's what we're discussing here. So,
I'm gonna interrupt you for a second. Yep. If we were to ask you to come back and explain the MOU and explain an appeals process and to give us further testimony in that arena, if we decide to dig in this as a committee, the agency would be prepared to do that.
of course,
So it's agenda wise, I want to make sure before we go dig into all of that, I want to make sure a few more questions. And if we're going to go do that direction, then we would have to change our timeline and expectation. But I do think that there may be some support to do that, but not in relation to acting on this memo this amendment right this minute. But I want to make sure that sounds like a lot of stuff. Representative Burke, if you want to, I think you had your hand up or not?
No.
I'd rather
but
make sure we get all
I
our
would
questions
agree-
out on the table first.
I would
before we're
agree
on the
with you that I'd like to hear more testimony and consider this further.
Do you feel that you have to have that before you can act on that, or can we act to that within our purview as a committee?
Yeah, I think it's clear, but I mean, obviously more testimony is better. I think that, well, I guess the question I was gonna ask is, so the ball was in the town's purview. The town made that decision, right? But, yeah, so what's the position of the town at this point? Are they wanting to reconsider? Or is this pressure just coming from constituents?
So the email string that I saw with Representative Donahue, I mentioned the sort of newly opened pizza facility. They were the ones who reached out to her from the information I have. I'm not aware of the town coming back to us since 2023 objecting to the current design. Not saying it didn't occur, but the information that was presented to me, that was the case.
And the individual case is not relevant to the.
Right.
Either, so I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we're
Right.
going. And I was interrupting you again.
No, and I guess I just, if possible, I'd like 1 minute just to talk about complete streets and sort of the conformance with that, but certainly member questions can be answered.
I just wanted to say one more thing, back to that point of looking at it, from the point of view of a 100-year bridge or whatever. The snowplow situation could be solved in the future. I mean, there might be, town might get it, I'm just saying to construct the bridge without the sidewalk seems like, from my point of view, not really thinking ahead to the future, that's all. We understand the current situation.
Representative Lally and then Representative, if you're done, Representative Lally and then Representative Case.
Yeah, I'm going back to this really disenfranchises the little places that do not have these, the capacity right now. And, I think, yes, it's a self-made problem in this instance. I agree with Representative Keiser, but, at the same time, I feel it's very much like a foregone conclusion that probably a little select board, maybe 3 members, that's very volunteer. I mean, these, I have some familiarity working in deeply small places. These are the kinds of decisions that they arrive at, and it's tantamount to cutting your nose off to spite your face, right? So if I go back to, if we really are serious about implementing housing in villages and downtowns across rural Vermont, I deeply sympathize with some entrepreneur who is trying their best to establish a business in this little place, which is probably transformative in this tiny little hamlet, which has probably had nothing. And let me tell you, the obstacles of wastewater and the whole other, the state paradigm of permitting is stacked against these little places. So this is probably an incredible opportunity. And, we've got to make it possible for these places to have a kind of like sort of Main Street vibe so that you have the ability to get around. And, I think, again, this instance is for me, representative of problems that are, more broad. And I would like to see that MOU. And I would also, Mr. Chair, like to take testimony from our RPCs, who are often, the sort of go-betweens with assisting little places that don't have professional planning to, participate in modern life. Let's put it that way.
Okay. I think we're back to representative or to our witness in terms of speaking on
Here.
the street.
Yeah, so just one quick response to Representative Lally. My point of showing the larger area, if you might remember, the area to the north or to the screen left side of the bridge really doesn't lend itself to housing, right? There's a fuel depot, there's the granite shed, a cemetery, and there's basically one residence within a quarter mile and a cemetery. So I think where Complete Streets comes into the context sensitivity piece of it, the hamlet, by and large, where the densest housing is connected, and the likelihood of housing on the other side of the bridge at this point seems unlikely. So to go back to Complete Streets. So Act 34, Section 1 of 2011 compelled us to consider complete streets in all projects. And there are 3 citations from our Complete Streets guidance that I want to bring to your attention. One is context is critical. right? That's the first point. Project managers are encouraged to consider the suggestions in this document along with other factors such as geographic location, users of the facility, gaps in existing infrastructure, local plans, etc. Second point, there is no single complete street solution, right? There are many complete street design elements, widened shoulders, sidewalks, pedestrian islands, curb extensions, etc. So again, it isn't just to achieve complete streets principles, isn't just to build a 5.5-foot sidewalks, right? It is context sensitive. There are sort of maintenance requirements as you consider complete street pieces. The three that are applicable in this case, how is drainage managed, right? So again, I mentioned essentially what you'd be creating is a 5.5-foot snow storage facility. Not only is that subject to freeze-thaw cycles that then introduces water to the road, but now you've got a chloride saturated snowbank essentially sitting on our bridge, which does affect the life cycle of our structure. Second, who's maintaining these elements once complete? The towns said, absolutely, we're not doing it. And then third, do such elements still allow for snow removal? So, we kind of have 3 strikes just on those criteria. So as I understand the bill, it's asking us to look at our MOUs and report back, do they in any way encumber the application of complete streets? I can answer that today unequivocally. No, it does not, because complete streets does not dictate sidewalks in every location. It does not dictate anything. What it says is look at the context at the location and try to make advancements for that location that makes sense. And so that's where we would fall on this amendment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any last or another question?
One last quick question. With the current design of this bridge, if at a future time the town said, oh, we now have the resources, we can maintain a sidewalk, does this design allow for, after the fact, putting in a curb cut or something that would separate the car traffic from this 5-foot wide area that could be a sidewalk?
So it's a 5.5-foot or 5-foot shoulder now. Typically, we would want to put in that 5.5-foot sidewalk. Could we do something? Absolutely, right? We can just about engineer anything. Is it sort of designed in such a fashion it would be an easy retrofit? Probably not.
Anybody else have any other questions for the witness?
Yes, thank you. Was there any consideration of like curb cuts or anything to sort of slow traffic in that area as part of this? Do you know?
The only sort of resources that we would have would be to maintain what would be a pretty substandard lane width, right? Because it is that feeling of a tight constricted area, which then really, endangers bicyclists, right? So we do try to thread the needle between providing all users room and recognizing there's sort of a psychological comfort that potentially could increase speed. Again, the geometry of this site, it's not like a long straightaway where people are just going to start drag racing through it just because there's a nasty vertical curve and there's 2 nasty horizontal curves. It's a 4-way intersection on both sides of the bridge and the railroad tracks. So yes, I do expect probably some increase in speed. I'm not expecting a dramatic jump though.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions for the witness? Thank you very much for coming in, Jeremy. We really appreciate it. Background. So now we are in a new territory for me. We haven't had an amendment previously. We haven't had a T-bill previously. So we didn't put on the agenda discussion, but we do need to make some action here at this point. I would say that very much having specifics demonstrates the issue of a review of policy. And when I hear our representatives talk, that it really sounds to me like we may have a policy that we would want to dig into and find out a lot more about in terms of recommendation of witnesses, of RPCs, of perhaps the League of City and Towns, perhaps a town manager and why they chose that, as also the MOU itself. And maybe there is a need for understanding the appeal process, understanding what can be done. I thought I also heard that at least 3 members have been through a similar situation, so we have enough interest, I think, to consider digging this into a future policy or expansion of a policy. With that, and if that's what the committee would like, I can see us going down that path in a future piece of our agenda. As far as the amendment itself, Complete Streets is clearly being considered, the design is being considered. The issue is not, the amendment doesn't ask us to look at the appeal or look at the process or whatnot, which it sounds like what we actually need to do, or potentially need to do. So that's where I'm sort of coming on the amendment. I think that the representative has highlighted an area that is clearly of interest of a lot of people, but isn't necessarily addressed directly in the amendment. And I would commit that I think we can policy. So we get hung up on whether this is the right bridge or not, or this is the right, that's not our job. Our job is, do we need to look at policy? And I hear that at least quite a few members want to do that. If that we want to dig into this policy perhaps more. I don't see this amendment as the way to do that. I think the agenda pushing forward and taking that on as something to dig into is the way that our committee would want to react to that. But that's where I'm coming from. Is I will open it up to discussion if people at least understand or can clarify what you think I'm asking you to look at and what the committee we're willing to do. Representative McCoy.
So a lot of times we've sat in here through the years and the agency we just say, can you do this, and come back with something in January, rather than putting it in statute and require, and they do. They'll come back with a report in January. I think what we have in place right now worked. I mean, they followed the agent AOT followed the Complete Streets. They designed a bridge with Complete Streets in mind. The town is the one that said no, not the agency. They built it with Complete Streets in mind. And that's what our goal has always been. And it worked. If a town doesn't want to do it, it's like we can't mandate the town. And this just seems like, yeah, we didn't like your answer. So go back again to the municipalities and rework that again. So that's why I'm hesitant to do this. If there's a way that we can, have the agency look to see if, maybe they reword some document they already adhered to that, satisfies what's happening here. I personally feel they've already done what they were required to do. And some of this stuff as well, that's in this amendment. So I'm hesitant to put this in as an amendment. Perhaps.
Hearing what you're saying, I agree that the process worked. I also heard that we might want to look at more policy in terms of what happens after it worked, then what? So but I agree with where you're headed. But I'm also saying that we very well may want to do some more work on top of this. We will set the policy. If there is an addition to the policy needs to be made, I think we could do that, is what if there needs to be a dig into the policy, then we could do that. And we can decide if we need to have an appeals process, if we need to go further, if we're really considering 100 years. That's what we're here for, is to decide the policy, not the individual. We have a good example. That's what I hear, that it worked, but now maybe we need to talk about whether what goes further. But that's my perspective on it. Representative Powell?
Yeah, thank you. I have to agree that, I think 20 years ago or 25 years ago, you might not have gotten this review. And I guess as a biker, if there was a sidewalk there, that means the roadway for bikes is that much narrower. So it's they're all trade-offs. I think it'd be worth looking at what the MOU and talking why the town was unable to do this. And in fact, it's just the snow plow, but it appears that the program worked. It'd be interesting to talk to the planning commission too. Is there growth expected in this area? But I'm not sure, to add this amendment necessarily to our bill will move those processes forward any faster, I guess.
Representative Casey and then Representative Lemon.
I would definitely be concerned about what this amendment might do down the road. To the towns. You know, what kind of a burden, are we shooting ourselves in the foot for the towns? I mean, I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but I mean, I'd definitely be concerned what it does down the road.
Okay,
For sure.
thank you. Representative Lemon.
Yeah, I'd like there to be some clarity about what is the range of things possible in a variety of contexts. This seems to me, it just feels like kind of an impoverished solution that a bigger place would not accept as, or would be in a position of not needing to accept as satisfactory. It is not a comfortable condition to walk in alongside cars, particularly on a bridge. There seems to be a need for a different approach, and I'm not sure what that would be. But I think I'd like to see some attention given to this so that we are not kind of saying, okay, little rural place, you have limited capacity, so you kind of don't get to have nice things. You get to have a more car-centric result, because that's as good as you get, because you can't figure out how to plow this. That seems, in this day and age, and with so much state policy consensus, that we need to be making use of these existing settled areas where that are safe from flood hazard for their development potential.
Representative White.
Oh,
Thank you.
I'm also in agreement that this amendment doesn't feel like it belongs in our current T-bill, but, I'm grateful to Representative Donahue for bringing this up, because I agree with Representative Lally that I don't think this is necessarily, the town doesn't want this, but the town is a small town that probably doesn't have the resources to support something like this. So I think it's a bit of a bigger issue. I'd love to hear some testimony from the regional planning commissions, or to just see if there's a way we can, something like this could be flagged in the future, to have a discussion to make sure we are looking at small towns and their limited resources, and considering the fact that they too deserve some nice things. And it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. Like, you got a pizza place now, they want some more pedestrian, but and if we don't allow that, is there going to be more commercial development? So anyway, I'd like to see more testimony. I'd say, the amendment doesn't feel like it's right for the T-bill, but it absolutely requires more conversation.
Okay, was there any other?
Just one question for Jeremy. I guess this boils down to, do we want to have a policy mandating the state take care of sidewalks on bridges that go through town municipality and state roads? How many roads or sidewalks do we maintain on bridges, town bridges that go through, or state bridges that go through town municipalities? Are they asking for something outside the norm, or what's the norm I'm trying to get at?
To the best of my knowledge, and I would have to double check with Attorney Patino, the head of maintenance, I don't believe we maintain any sidewalks. If there is a state route through a town and it's identified as a class 1, obviously the town would maintain that. And I'm not aware of any, I'm not saying there aren't any, but I'm not aware of any sidewalks on state routes that we maintain.
All right, that's all I need to hear. That makes sense.
I'm sorry, I just want to say Representative White.
I don't know where it seems like people think we should be studying this more. So I don't know if we find it unfavorable, but somehow let the representative know that we are interested in what she's saying, that we will continue the conversation. And then I don't know if she presents and withdraws, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't.
No, I think the chair has that lined up.
Oh,
for a response. It's one step ahead,
I,
right? I believe
I'm sorry,
Kate's.
Representative,
Or,
well, I guess should we make the motion and then just?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so.
but I guess this
I
is,
just want to be clear about, maybe I should
Yeah.
just, I don't know, I can always apologize later for being due.
you use that a
I
lot.
think that we, and I'm only gonna use it for 8 or 10 more years. I have excuses as long as I am tall, so. Representative Donahue indicates that she would make her, presentation on the floor. Perhaps withdraw her amendment. Representative Lally is in a spot, as you all know, can tell, that is very critical to her, view of what we should be doing, would be in a position to, so show the, committee's support of the issue that she's raised, and that we would commit that we will dig into this further. Again, not into the Northfield Bridge itself. We will hear you as an example, but as the policy of what we think is or isn't happening out there. It is not up to us to guess why Northfield did or didn't choose to do. We can hear them say that directly, but we're not going to guess what they did or didn't want. But we have clearly 3 other members that have been through a similar thing. We are willing to dig into the policy further, but not through this amendment. And Representative Lally would be in a spot to indicate that support to Representative Donahue and the body as a whole, is what the direction that we are looking to go. But I wanted to make sure that everybody had heard their piece, but I also really want to dig into it further, and both from the representative and from the agency. So I would look to you, unless there's more comments, questions.
and this is a straw poll because we officially don't have the bill or the amendment, just for, the newer members. It's not recorded, it's just considered a straw vote, but I move that we find it unfavorable.
All those that find it unfavorable, please raise your hand. So it's unanimously unfavorable. If there's not, when the opportunity provides itself on the floor, Representative Lally can speak to the committee's position on it. And thank you all very much for your time. We're on break. We'll be back at 10:45. Our committee assistant will update the agenda accordingly. Thank you for your time and effort on this, and everybody.